And we are back on Decent Cities talking about decentralized virtual meta cities. And joining me today is the co-founder of Blockspaces, Rosa Shores. Welcome.
Thank you. It's really great to be here.
So you guys you've been in the blockchain space since, over 10 years now, essentially right on 10 years. And somebody hit the accelerate button here recently, I guess, right?
Yeah. I mean, we've kind of watched it accelerate. And so to us, this has been a long time coming, but at the same time, we've kind of watched this space grow and emerge. And so, it's kind of come in fits and starts, which I think is a little bit to be expected with emerging tech. And, of course, we saw kind of a little bit of a push in 2017. But yeah, I would definitely say that COVID has had some really interesting impacts on blockchain specifically and some of the use cases that are emerging, just because of the pandemic. So yeah, I would say it's accelerating even just in that regard.
And I'm going to give you a little more credit. I mean, at least in Tampa Bay, you've done more than watch it happen. You've made it happen. You and Gabe have been running meetups and building a community now forever.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little about your blockchain journey and go back to those earliest days when it was, 3 or 4 people talking with the dream about blockchain.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, no, Gabe and I, so the first time I ever heard about blockchain was, obviously in those days within the concept of Bitcoin, because that's all that it was. And Gabe was the first person that ever said the word Bitcoin to me. And it was sort of like a shadowed phone call of like, there's this really crazy thing I have to tell you about. And I don't have anybody else to talk to you about it. So you're going to think I'm crazy, but listen to this. And I thought he was crazy because it sounded, this, electronic money. I mean, and then immediately thought, is this like for gaming? What is this? And of course that was like 2012. So, there was you didn't go online and, look for, Bitcoin. It was just sort of a computer nerd thing, which he was. And so he told me about it. I thought it just was very hard to grasp and I really didn't understand it, but I kind of hung in there. And, once it kind of clicks, as we've watched it now happen with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people over the years, once it clicks, it really kind of hits you, the capabilities of this and kind of what the larger kind of North Star is for Bitcoin and decentralized applications. And, really quickly on, I started understanding some of these potential with blockchain, as well as cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. And that was sort of my first kind of grasp of really understanding it was I was in the e-commerce division at HSN, Home Shopping Network. And we were really focused on, at that time, one-touch payment processing and how we could move customers quicker through the shopping funnel in an e-commerce environment because, it just is proven that the faster that they can get to checkout, the more they convert. Now, of course, that's kind of a given these days. Everybody's got that kind of, swipe and pay. But at that time, it was really focused on that. How can we get people through the shopping cart faster? And it just seemed to me that like digital money that you could use like cash, not a credit card, but some sort of electronic cash that you could really use as quickly and as easily as you do cash, but in a digital world, that just seemed like a complete no-brainer to me. I mean, just from an e-commerce background, regardless of how early we were or how the problems that still needed to be worked out, it just seemed like, how could that possibly not be the future? And so, just thinking of it like in that way, this is cash that you can use online in a digital environment was like, okay, that makes sense. And then, really quickly after that, I started thinking about blockchain and how utilizing that in a business environment. And this is before enterprise blockchain was even a thing. But because of, where I worked in my retail background, I started thinking about ways, especially with like a retail supply chain and ethically sourcing products, how interesting that would be for consumers, always kind of with this retail hat on, I kind of, really saw the possibilities for, wow, if I was a consumer and I could instantly know that my things, did not come from a sweatshop in China or didn't support child labor, was ethically sourced. That seemed, again, kind of a no-brainer. I was like, well, that would have some really amazing implications if this technology develops to that degree. So Gabe and I were just kind of talking about these things amongst ourselves. And you really kind of yearn, anybody who's been in this space for any length of time, you recognize that you yearn to have other people to talk to about this stuff because it's so revolutionary, and you just like to be around like-minded people who are, thinking about these things too. And so we started the meetup. It was really Gabe's baby at that point, with Tampa Bay Bitcoin, but we started having this meetups in 2013. I was just kind of helped him co-organize a bit, but he was the chief Tampa Bay Bitcoiner, and still is. We still have those meetups. We just had one Wednesday night, so he does them every week still since 2013, and that kind of became the catalyst of drawing this community together. Around people that really loved this technology, loved the promise of this technology. It started attracting entrepreneurs, developers, people that wanted to, work on projects together, find other people who understood the technology, as well as, potentially find developers and things for their team. So we saw some companies sort of emerge from those meetup pockets, being one of them. Around 2015 or so, we started seeing kind of this emergence of what is now known as kind of enterprise blockchain, which was the Linux Foundation launched a protocol called Hyperledger, and that was really focused on what I was talking about before. How can enterprises really kind of integrate this technology? And so we started having business people come to our meetups. And so, the Ethereum project launched in 2014. All of that time, everybody's talking about, wow, all of this development that's happening then. But that was really like this amazing time in blockchain where, Hyperledger came online and Corda came online, and you saw Ethereum launch in 2014. And so, those were smart contracts. And so you started, this technology just started blowing up. And so we started doing Tampa Bay blockchain developers and Tampa Bay Ethereum group. That was all us. And so around 2017, we were like, we need a place. I mean, our meetups started growing, and we had multiple meetups, and people wanted to learn more. They want to have formal classes. They wanted to have like an environment that was almost like an incubator. So we opened Blockspaces, and we opened kind of a soft launch in late 2017, and early 2018 we did our grand opening. And so that was kind of like the birth of Blockspaces, and a very quick version of my blockchain history, believe it or not.
It's great. It's a really impressive turnaround too, to go from first exposure in 2012 and just a year later really driving the community with meetup groups and everything. That's a really quick understanding, to go from just something that maybe is a novelty and an interest to actually having meetup groups.
Yeah.
And I also think that it's interesting when, you kind of think of, you look at history and you see those geologic layers of how things stack up right over the eras. And the blockchain one is sort of interesting because it has this sort of mix of money and then sort of tech, sort of the nerd community. And then that gets a little more money, and then the money people come in, and then the business people, and then that spawns kind of the less hardcore tech people. And so, can you see the different layers as they've sort of been attracted to the space and kind of come in and put themselves into the bedrock, we'll say, of the community. And now, we're still sort of sort of up and coming, right? There's sort of a good representation from all the kind of groups, but yet it's still relatively early adopters, partly because of the learning curve, really.
Absolutely. And I mean, enterprises, this is such a kind of transformative technology. And I know that there's so many people you hear all the time, comparing it to the internet. And, of course, blockchain and Bitcoin are here because of the internet. So it's kind of a strange comparison. But at the same time, it's transformative in the same way, in that, this is something that, takes the way we did things before, and now we're doing them differently. And I think one of the things that we've seen that has been a little bit of a struggle for enterprise, and even some of these larger players that have deployed blockchain solutions like IBM, and even like Microsoft has blockchain services and things like that. But like, one of the problems is that blockchain is not a technology that you utilize in the same way, you don't take a brand new technology that kind of changes the way we do things and then try to force it into solving a business problem in the same old way that you would solve the business problem, but now we're just using a different kind of technology. Blockchain is a governance structure that requires incentivized systems that operate in a way that businesses aren't necessarily, it's not business as usual. It's a different kind of transformed business. And it mandates cooperation within a business ecosystem that businesses aren't used to doing with their competitors or even with their suppliers and partners and things like that. And so it's a learning curve. And we've seen some of these companies, try to jump forward and be a first mover, which is awesome. Or, big, large vendors like IBM jump forward and productize blockchain in a way that they're just used to doing. You can't really do that with blockchain. You have to think about the governance, the cooperation. How do you incentivize people to participate in this blockchain network now that you've launched? Otherwise, you just have hundreds of different still siloed systems that are just now all utilizing blockchain, which is really just, I have the same problem, except now it's on an immutable ledger, which, some people might say, now your problem's worse. So you have to really be thoughtful about how you deploy blockchain solutions, the use case that you're using for blockchain, and how you're really thinking about the entire ecosystem, the entire network of participants, and how they're going to be incentivized to participate. So it's a learning curve, and the businesses that do it right will absolutely have competitive advantage in this world, and they'll absolutely be leap and bounds above how other people are functioning in a business environment. But you have to be thoughtful about it.
Yeah. And one of the big changes is really control. A lot of businesses thrive on forced secrecy, their intellectual property, sort of keeping what's under the hood out of the public eye. And this forces them to put it in the public eye. And it is the future, and it forces companies to say, how can we transparently partner with our customers, in a more symbiotic way than just saying, we're this black box over here and out spits a widget and you have to just buy the widget. The companies that are still living by that mindset will be disrupted, just like they have been within other industries.
Yeah. And, enterprise blockchain is kind of unique, and there's obviously a debate within the whole, even within the blockchain space, blockchain has grown so exponentially. Now it means so many different things now. I mean, in 2012, it meant Bitcoin. Now it means a range of things and a range of decentralization. And you have people that are, what we call, almost kind of fundamentalists that only think that, it's Bitcoin or nothing. You must have a public, fully decentralized. If you have a technology and the key feature is decentralization, if you start factoring in any sort of centralized structure, you're eliminating the key feature of the technology. And that's a valid point. However, we also recognize that because we meaning Blockspaces, has been involved with so many businesses now that have come to us with problems. They've said, I have this problem within a business environment. I feel like I'm inspired by something I've heard about blockchain and this decentralized or more distributed kind of way of doing business. Let me tell you about my problem. You tell me if it's something that we can impact with blockchain. And we hear these problems over and over and over again. And there are business problems that can be solved with blockchains that maybe act a little bit more like a new process management tool or new database structure that allows for some of the features of blockchain while also allowing for more private features, because we know in a business environment there is private information that some of these businesses, I don't care if it's 50 years from now, they're still going to want to keep private. And so some of these enterprise blockchains do just that. They incorporate features of blockchain, but allow for the individual businesses to pick and choose sort of what kind of information they want to have actually fully transparent and what sort of information they want to keep private. You can kind of think of this in terms of industries like healthcare, right? So, we just recognize that is going to be the way it's going to be in business. That doesn't mean these businesses don't have problems that don't need a major update on their business process management systems. And that's where we see this kind of notion of enterprise blockchain fitting in really nicely.
And the reality is that while it can be hugely beneficial for some businesses, there are other sectors where it could pose an existential threat, like banking and to some extent even government and revenue. And so you're going to get this sort of turmoil in the space that can often overshadow, the clear benefits that it has of maybe applying it to, your example of a supply chain where it makes sense for all the folks, all the different steps on that supply chain to be able to communicate transparently in an immutable way, even though it may be a private, the data in that blockchain may be private to just that supply chain. That's that mix of public and private data or whatever. But those same people that are going to work with banks, the banks may be and the governments may be pushing against that for completely, logical to them, in that it affects them adversely, but not necessarily, sort of irrelevant to the logic of what blockchain could be.
Yep, that's right. Well, and then we also see one of the other interesting things that we've seen is, that's kind of emerged is that we're going from this whole notion of, I have a blockchain and everybody in the world needs to onboard onto my blockchain, and my blockchain is going to win the cryptocurrency game, or it's going to win the DeFi game, or whatever it is. And we just don't believe that at all. We think this is a multi-blockchain world now, and you're going to have as many blockchains as potentially you have as websites, right? And so they serve a particular purpose, and we use these applications that now have blockchain backends, and this is just sort of normal business as usual. So we get to a place where we're not necessarily talking about, we envision a world where you're not necessarily saying, this is a blockchain application any more than you would say this is a JavaScript application, right? I mean, this is a new technology that becomes kind of like the backbone of all the things that we're going to build. And if you're going to build on the latest and the greatest, you'll use blockchain. And so in that regard, we see that this is a multi-blockchain world, and we have to integrate and interoperate all of these different blockchains with each other to create this whole world that we're moving toward, which is that whole Web 3.0 world. Blockchain becomes the infrastructure of all of those applications, whether it's, AI or IoT or, machine learning. Blockchain is technology that makes all those things function in this kind of Web 3 world.
Yeah, so let's dig into that a bit, because that's really interesting, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. So, maybe a casino, right? So a casino may have obviously food and beverage. That may be a complete a blockchain that's completely specialized for food and beverage. And then you may have a customer management, a user token, privacy token system. You may have some sort of thing that runs the gambling and keeps track of all the flow of money there. And then there may have been a token issued to even fund and sell equity to build the casino in the first place. And all of those will exist as separate blockchains that are utilized for specific purposes. Is that kind of a fair representation?
That's an awesome representation, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. And so even within one business and one business process, we see that those are multiple blockchain systems, right? In the future, and maybe even not so far into the future. We've talked to clients about, supply chain. And so you think, okay, supply chain. Well, I was just talking about, we can use it for track and trace to show the provenance of items, to show that they came from ethical sources. Well, sure. But supply chains also have a supply chain finance component to it. You have to often do cross-border payments within a supply chain process. You have to do invoice reconciliation within the supply chain process. You have to have supplier credentialing within a supply chain process. So it's not just about track and trace. And we know that there's multiple blockchains to serve every single one of those things that I just mentioned. So it's not all, hey, let's just put this all on Hyperledger Fabric. It's how can we allow a business to even use multiple blockchains sometimes within a single business process. So that is our focus. Blockspaces, that is 100% what we're focused on now, is how can we allow businesses to use multiple blockchains to have almost sort of a opportunity to be able to change those blockchain protocols as they come out, or use them as they need within their business and their business process, and then integrate up into whatever existing business applications they use already, like ERP systems.
So to be the connective tissue between blockchains within a group. So
yep.
how does that work? Walk us through, the platform that you're building, and how does that integration play out in a business? What's the use
Yep.
case?
So our, again, like our kind of wheelhouse and what we saw the big opportunity for was a couple of different things. First of all, you do have some very large enterprises now that are deploying blockchain solutions, but have no way to integrate their mid-market suppliers, vendors, and partners that are a necessary part of that ecosystem. So, that, and it's not like take Walmart, for example, who, had a big blockchain rollout with IBM. Well, it's not IBM. IBM doesn't serve kind of those mid-market players, and neither does Walmart. They're not building mid-market software. And so how are those people onboarding now onto their big blockchain network? So we are building a connectivity platform that allows for very easy integration, or the proposition of very easy integration in a codeless environment, to allow those internal developer teams within an enterprise or within a mid-market enterprise specifically, to have a very kind of codeless drag and drop API focused connective middleware layer to connect in from blockchain applications on the back end into their existing business applications on the front end. It's sort of like the way MuleSoft does or Boomi, except in support of blockchain networks. We know that blockchains require their own kind of technology stack that includes, nodes and specialized cloud services and things like that. So we support all of those back-end sort of features that are necessary for blockchain networks to function efficiently. So the customers that would be using our platform would be able to have those sort of resources in-house, just in the software, without having to have specialized blockchain developers on their team.
And do you see a world where companies, actively look to decentralize certain functions, like, maybe if there was sort of like an employee time off DAO, or sometimes employees, they have services that'll give them advances on their payroll, or different things that then the companies can, that these services may just exist as autonomous DAOs that the companies just plug into, and that's another integration opportunity.
Absolutely, 100%. And we're seeing companies that want to do very innovative things now, way more than in the past. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of the call, that COVID has really accelerated blockchain adoption and blockchain interest for numerous reasons. But we watched supply chains go offline. We watched, this ability or inability to kind of do proper tracking of disease surveillance. We've witnessed some of the disruption within the food supply chain because all of a sudden, restaurants and schools and stuff closed down, and the farmers weren't able to kind of get out to brand new ways to distribute like their food. So we watched a bunch of things happen in COVID that we never, ever, ever thought that we would see, or that if we had tried to describe, why would I need like this kind of single source of truth, so to speak, for all of these things? It almost always felt like it was kind of like this, kind of ethereal, kind of conceptual kind of situation. If I had said to anybody 2 years ago, well, just imagine, Jable, that, there's a global pandemic and all of your China suppliers go off and you lose, multi-millions of dollars in a month because, all of these Chinese suppliers go offline. You can't easily replace them because you don't have a single source of suppliers that you can easily reconnect back into. I mean, if I had tried to pitch that 2 years ago, they'd been like, okay, yeah, get back with me when that global pandemic happens. And, yet here we are. So I feel like there was a lot of things that happened that showed just how fragile some of our systems are, that we need more, resilient systems for a digital world that allow for like kind of ease of connectivity. And then we also have seen some things like some of these ransomware attacks for like the pipeline, which has happened with the pipeline. There's a blockchain network that we actually have a strategic partnership with now called Trust Your Supplier, that actually tracks the credential, the CMMC credential. It's a cybersecurity credential that's going to be starting to be required by the Department of Defense. in order to show that suppliers are properly certified in cybersecurity, so they can do business without this fear of being hacked and ransomware, right? And so there is at least the notion that blockchain could potentially become the gold standard on that sort of credentialing kind of tracking system. And so you're starting to see things. The FDA is now working on a project called the New Era of Food Transparency that puts blockchain almost as the gold standard for food safety. These are things that we're seeing, kind of come down or trickle down from the government level because they recognize technology is very powerful within a compliance environment. So, these things are real. They're happening right now. And, you can Google all of that. That's like a real thing. And so, we're seeing blockchain kind of emerge as this gold standard, even within, like I said, a compliance environment, which is, a whole nother level of blockchain.
Yeah, and in that realm, it's going to get weird for regulators, right? When they're looking at, with DAOs or with trustless decentralized things. It's sometimes harder, as of now, can't sue a DAO or hold somebody responsible because it's just a thing in that run. So, I know you're quite active with the Florida Blockchain Business Association. What are some of the things that that are on your radar and advocacy initiatives you're doing to help prepare us to handle those things going forward?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, so I am the vice president of the Florida Blockchain Business Association. So we're closely. I mean, that's in between my revelations about blockchain and realizing what it was, and opening Blockspaces, sort of my first foray with Gabe into the whole blockchain, startup kind of thing, was a project called Clear Voter, which kind of tackled voting and, this kind of notion of blockchain-based voting. We got a ways to go before blockchain-based voting is ready to go, just because that involves really kind of nailing SSI, which is, self-sovereign ID on blockchain. That said, it's super exciting, and we've always been very politically involved. So politics was kind of like my first foray into blockchain in that regard, and always been very interested in making sure that Florida remains legislatively friendly to this technology, including cryptocurrency, because that's a fintech kind of play, and we want to make sure that legislation makes it easy for those companies to do business here, that it's easy to move here. And, we've watched, being in this for so long, we've watched the states that have embraced this technology with friendly legislation, just leap and bounds. They do attract those companies. And so, when you're talking about like a technology that has global implications, if you as a state start doing very restrictive kind of legislation the way New York did, to think that those companies are just going to sit around and, either go out of business or, comply to regulation when they can just, move to Wyoming.
Miami. Yeah.
Then they're going to move. And so they have. And, we think that Florida is a very attractive state for these people, not just because we're a beautiful state, but because, we already have low taxes. It's a great place to live, cost of living wise. So we just want to work very hard to make sure that our legislators and our lawmakers are very aware of this technology, the capabilities of this technology. Of course, if you had Sam on, about what we did in helping get past the bill that put forth the blockchain task force, as well as the fintech sandbox here in the state of Florida. And then this past session, of course, the legislation around helping to better define cryptocurrency. And what that really does is just it allows for clarity within the definition. So some of these companies, just feel a little bit more comfortable doing business in it, and especially like with money transmission. How do we define crypto in that sort of way? And so that all has implications on enterprise blockchain and Blockspaces, and anybody that's a blockchain company that's doing business in the state of Florida. And, while I'm from Tampa Bay and I will always be a Tampa Bay cheerleader, so to speak, it's important for Florida to have density and be on the same page with that. And, we really see that coming together statewide, which is really exciting.
And you mentioned a couple of names you mentioned there. So Sam Arms, he founded for Blockchain Business Association. He was my guest on the last episode 2 of Decent Cities. And you did a great, you did a piece with Charles Hoskinson from Cardano about voting as well. So I'll link to that in the description. That was great. And following up on a podcast he actually did about it, which was quite in depth as well.
Yeah, well, the project that Gabe and I started called Clear Voter, Charles was actually kind of helping us. I mean, he was certainly advising us. I mean, this is before Cardano. He had actually just left Ethereum, and so he's a good friend. And we kind of aligned. Our friendship developed over our love of politics, our love hate, and how we thought this technology could really, help create better communities. And Clear Voter was a platform that actually was just a civic engagement. And I say was, I mean, it's still there. It's still alive, kind of. But, we've just been so immersed in Blockspaces. But, we really believe in the power of communities and the ability to kind of impact legislation on a local level. People get very caught up in federal issues that are very divisive, and sometimes they're purposely very divisive because very important to kind of keep those your core base that votes for you kind of divided. Division within politics is important to keep those factions supported. So we just saw the power of aligning communities around issues instead of political parties. That could lead the way for blockchain-based voting. So Charles was sort of advising us on that way back then, and we just kept our friendship going. We actually support the Cardano network and Blockspaces platform. We just launched a Cardano staking pool. Staking pools are also another really interesting thing that corporations and businesses are now actually interested in, because it potentially can create a separate revenue stream for businesses in a really unique way. So we fully support Cardano for sure.
Well, there's a few things I want to dig into there. So, I want to say that's sort of the premise behind what I'm working on, which is the civic platform MetaCity. I think that divisiveness, as it's gone beyond what is a healthy level of different perspectives, right? That come together to work out and get to the best final answer. It's become something much more dark and negative than that. And I think a lot of that is just what hat you have on for most of the time. And I think with big social, use Facebook as an example. If you love the former president, probably 85% of your friends love the former president. And if you hated the former, so it really is. It says it's social media, but it's actually highly divided along national ideology. And because it's so addictive and people spend so much of their time on it, really it starts to make sense as to why there's such an identity attached into it. And if somebody went to church for 7 or 8 hours a day, anybody who wasn't in that religious space with them kind of becomes the other. If you listen to Tampa Bay Buccaneers AM radio for 8 to 10 hours a day, anybody who's not in that space with you kind of becomes other. So I think one of the important things about bringing these virtual communities together is simply that you're spending time with your St. Pete hat on or your Tampa hat on, which is a different hat than your national ideology, and it starts to give you a little bit of balance and a little bit of perspective. So that's actually one of the big premises for behind what we're building.
Well, I would love to collaborate with you on that, and any input that I can give it. Like I said, that was a passion thing for us that we've had to move on from, because we just, Blockspaces has just done so phenomenally well. But that's kind of a passion thing for us, and me too. And I feel like that we have so much more in common, certainly at a community level, or even within your voting district. And, that's really how you can get things done. It's difficult to move legislation at a federal level. It's very easy to impact legislation at, the state and local level. And that, at the end of the day, is where you live your daily life. You think that the federal issues are more important. It's easy to get sucked into these very divisive federal issues, but we have much more in common at a local level, and that is where you can impact legislation and really feel that difference in your day-to-day life. And so, aligning people around, hey, it doesn't matter what my political leaders are necessarily saying, but what can we do to make Tampa better? What can we do to make this voting district better? And then focusing on those issues in that way, I think is very, very powerful. So
Agreed.
I'm a fan.
And because you have a unique purview, changing gears a little bit, I would love to get to spend a few minutes on a little, your walk down memory lane with Charles. You knew him pre-Cardano. Can you kind of remember when you guys met, and just sort of as you've watched him grow, and then this Cardano thing comes out to be a major force in the blockchain world?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear what you remember about that relationship.
Gosh. Okay. So I met Charles in 2014. I think it was 2014. And it was around we did, Bitcoin conferences back then were not like Bitcoin conferences now. Right now, they're like very flashy, and there's like a lot of, these people are like almost kind of celebrities now in a weird way. But back then it was a very small group of people. And, we all still say, you can't say that you were in blockchain in 2013 and 2014 because everybody that was in blockchain in 2013 kind of knew each other. So we were all like, yeah, you weren't there. And I'm not talking about like at a local level. I'm talking about, like globally or whatever. And so we were all like in a Skype. We were planning this conference. The very first conference that I ever went to, I think was right after Ethereum launched. Ethereum launched, of course, in Miami at the North American Bitcoin Conference. And then right after that, there was a conference called Bitcoin in the Beltway that was in Washington. And I was up there for that. And right on the heels of that, there was a really cool conference called Coins of the Kingdom that was at Disney. And it was, it sounds crazy now, but, Bruce Fenton, Andreas Antonopoulos, like all of these people, they were in Orlando at Disney just kind of hanging out, but they weren't famous. And, they were just people, they were just our crazy friends in Bitcoin. And so Charles actually was kind of working on this project called BitNation that he wasn't on the project, but he was sort of in this Skype group that was kind of planning some stuff around BitNation, which I think has since kind of gone away. But it was about kind of like this government kind of project that was going on. And I just met him through that group and kind of doing that work. And we just started talking about politics, and he was, really involved with the Ron Paul campaign, as was so many people, in these kind of original libertarian roots of Bitcoin. And, we just started talking about that idea and the idea for Clearvoter. And, Clearvoter actually came to be because Gabe and I were campaigning for a local libertarian candidate here named Lucas Overby. And Lucas was running for a special seat as a libertarian candidate. And he actually came to us and said he was very inspired by Justin Amash, who is a senator. And he said that he was very inspired by him because he's so transparent in his vote, and that he posts on Facebook why he voted a certain way, so all of his constituents can see why. He's just very extremely transparent. And he said, I feel like if we can put like Senate votes somehow on a blockchain to give transparency into why these people voted the way they voted and stuff like that, and then hold those representatives accountable for the way they voted and the things that they support, it would be really powerful. And we thought that was amazing. So we kind of started working on that, and that kind of over the course of a couple of years transformed into Clearvoter. But Charles was just he's very, very highly political. And he always kind of has been very interested in politics and sort of the travesty that has become in the United States. Corporatism, of course, leading the day, and how we can get back to a more grassroots kind of government, which again is sort of a passion of a lot of people in that original kind of group of people that were very inspired by Bitcoin. So, it just kind of evolved from there, and we just developed a friendship. And he was very interested in Clearvoter and advised us quite a bit on when we wrote the white paper. So that friendship has just, lasted throughout the years. And yeah, and he talked to me about IOHK and Cardano, and thought it was amazing and still do, and really proud to support that network.
That's great. And he's certainly a thought leader. So it seems like a natural extension from way back when to where he's at now. It just seems like a natural march for him. And yeah, it's cool. Wonderful. So let's look at your hopes and dreams for us here in Tampa Bay. What's the next year hold? The other thing that's interesting is, as you've been in the meetups, so heavy in with the meetups, you've seen all different motivations for showing up at the meetups, right? And if you could sort of tweak, get a little more of this motivation, a little less of this, because some of that, this kind of goes with the advocacy hat on, obviously initially people were talking about, crypto is just for terrorists and for drug dealers and stuff, and that's largely gone away. And then there's obviously some legitimate environmental concerns and sort of, there seems to be just all these different, fireworks going off that are trying to get people's attention with regard to blockchain. If you had it your way, what would they focus on, and why would they show up?
Yeah, we just love them to show up. And I don't think that there's a perfect person to show up. And I think that everybody gets inspired by this technology for different things. And we've watched it kind of change over the years. And, we've watched people come in that are coming from, I can't tell you how many people we've had over the years that have come in and have said, I've worked in banking and the financial system my whole life, and I literally feel like I need to be in Bitcoin because I feel dirty. I mean, or, I don't want to contribute to these. I know what these problems are, and I don't want to contribute to them anymore. We've had a lot of people like that. We've had people come in because they're like, this is kind of cool, this is kind of interesting, and literally change their entire career path. That's happened. We've watched people come in and say, this is kind of interesting, and they go on to be developers or working for one of the startups. Pocket, launched in Blockspaces, ProCredX, which is another blockchain-based company here that's just raised, $3.5 million. They announced ProCredX at our grand opening. So we feel like everybody has a different motivation, and everybody has value in this space, no matter where you're coming from. The only thing we literally have no tolerance for is obvious scams. And so we are very, 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 we can spot a scam a mile away. And we ask those people to leave because we don't give financial advice. We don't tell people ever where to put their money, but we can definitely spot a scam. And that's the only thing I would say is that's the only kinds of people that are absolutely not allowed in our meetups. Other than that, whatever motivates you or gets you excited about the space, we'd love to see you.
True community building.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I've enjoyed the conversation, and thanks for all you've done to be the North Star for people to walk towards in Tampa Bay. And it's all working. We have a strong and vibrant community, getting stronger all the time. When I went to my first meetups, with Gabe made me feel very welcome, and he's a big part of why I've continued to dive in as deeply as I have had, and I'm happy to be part of it now. And thanks for setting up the environment.
Absolutely. Well, we're so honored to even play a small part in it, and we know it's going to continue to explode. And the investment has always been a little bit of a challenge here. Investors have always been a little bit of a challenge here because this is a really emerging tech kind of environment, and the amount of risk for what is kind of traditionally real estate developers and things like that. It's been a challenge. But I feel like with what's been happening lately in Miami, and of course, Blockspaces just raised a round of capital led by a San Francisco VC as well. I think that you're going to start seeing a comfort level with investors here that will really change the environment, because at the end of the day, anybody that's in blockchain is in a startup. Even Coinbase that IPO'd. I guess we could officially say they're not a startup anymore, but at the same time, it is the new space. So the majority of companies are startups, and startups are going to go where they can raise capital and build their businesses. And so we need to be able to find talent that's not as much of a, we have such a remote world now that it's not so much that, hey, I got to move to San Francisco so I can find developers, because you can kind of hire them anywhere. The capital is very, very important to a startup ecosystem, and that's what we are. Blockchain and Tampa Bay as a whole is a startup ecosystem. And so, we've got to have those kinds of resources in order to attract people here and make sure companies stay here. So we see that tide turning very quickly. Very excited to see a lot of interest now from VCs that even a couple of years ago might not have been interested. So that is super exciting for us. And I think you're going to see a lot more blockchain companies call Tampa home, both from being birthed here or from, relocating here.
Yeah, and you guys, 1.25 million, I think, or 1.3. So very big congratulations on that. And I just actually kicked off my raise last week, and I'm a few eyeballs rolling back in heads, but I think we've after a couple iterations on the deck, we've got it down to where it's in palatable to the sort of average investor and stuff. So hopefully we'll be following in your footsteps as the next investee in Tampa Bay, with some blockchain based work.
That would be amazing, and good luck to you. It's definitely a journey. So if you need a shoulder to cry on during that process, I definitely understand.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Very hard.
And I'm going to need some tech help.
It's like we're a woman-led blockchain company in Tampa, Florida. People are like looking at me like, "Yeah, good luck, lady. You're never going to raise money." But
first question is this so blockchains is what they build the condo out of now? It's like, no, not that kind of block.
It's true. So awesome. Thank you for this podcast and for doing, what you do to support this community. It's very important. And media and things like this is really important to get the word out. So thank you.
Happy to. Rosa Shores, Blockspaces. Say hi to Gabe, and we'll catch you at the next meetup.
Thank you.